came in late today. I had to give an economics test to my students this morning in Mississauga. They're doing supply and demand and equilibrium pricing. So I imagine you all were having more fun over here than they were. Broadly speaking, my research looks at the intersection between law and economics and technology. The bulk of my work has been in the realm of intellectual property law. Really, I guess I should say something about the theoretical approach because I don't have an official slide for it. And it seems to be an important part of the conversation today. What I tend to do is to try and combine Marxian crisis theory and structuration theory. Anthony Giddens, for those of you who had the displeasure of being forced to read that stuff at some point. So usually I'm looking at the relationship between technology and law. Today I'm going to be focusing more on the relationship between technology and economics. So this one's more of a direct application of structuration theory and crisis theory and technological development. So for those of you who are not familiar or have forgotten inadvertently or on purpose, structuration theory looks at technology as a process. It's a rejection of objectivist perspectives, which would be kind of like maybe hardcore political economy, where there's a structure that's external to social relationships, it's very deterministic and very one way. But it's also a rejection of more subjectivist approaches, which sees technology as a manifestation of strategic choices and social action. So this is like a Buddhist theory, seeking a middle way between structure and agency. So in all of my work, I'm trying to look at these technological artifacts as a manifestation of something that has like a socio-materiality to it. So this is a dialectical approach to technology. So I see it as something that is both physical and social. It's something that has a structural component, but it's also that the agents, the people engaging with it, live out the structure. And so it's continually reproduced over and over again, both physically and socially. The Marxian crisis theory part of this divides this up into a series of moments, so that there's the design of the technology. Well, Marx didn't really talk about technology. I kind of do this. There's a design of the technology, there's a distribution point of the technology, and then there's usage. And they all form a circuit, and they all have to work in order to reproduce the social system of capitalism on an expanded scale. It is a circuit, but they each occur at separate moments. And so because they're separated somehow, there is the potential for crises should the circuit not be reproduced. So that's where I come at all of this stuff. I probably already violated my outline, so we'll just skip that. This one has to do with Walmart and the way in which Walmart employees have been using things that we're probably used to critiquing all the time. Facebook and YouTube, you know, the tools of the man, so to speak. These technologies have actually been essential to the latest round of protests that have happened against Walmart. I don't know if any of you keep up with Walmart. I'm from the States and I'm from the South, and Walmart's a big deal. I've watched Walmart destroy my hometown. So I haven't seen a lot of Walmart here. There's a couple of them here in Toronto. Right?
Gotta go outside.
Yeah.
There was a union station efforts in Quebec as well.
Yeah.
Walmart. I think they were the first to bring in the union.
Well, they haven't been having a good couple of years, thankfully. Worldwide, there's over 2 million associates of Walmart, or employees of Walmart. In the United States, there's about 1.4 million people employed by Walmart. Average hourly wage is about $8.81. If you combine that into what Walmart would consider to be a full-time employment, that comes out in US dollars to about $15,500 annually. That is the combined accumulated wealth of the Walton family. I did a little math. If you were to make this annually, in order to accumulate that, you would have to work for 7 million years full time to get there. Walmart is, they increased healthcare premiums in 2011. This year they're increasing premiums by 36%. They've also increased deductibles. They are lowering hours oftentimes in order to avoid having to pay health benefits. Each Walmart store costs, there's about 4,000 Walmart stores. Each one costs taxpayers about $1 million because you have to pay to take care of the people who are making about $15,000 a year. So there's a tremendous social cost to Walmart. They're not a very popular company or firm, not at least amongst poor people and lefties like myself. But there's been some important developments in the last couple of years. Starting back, and actually, I might have this out of order. Kind of. I'll start with this one and work back. Back in 2005, Walmart's largest foreign subsidiary, Wal-Mart de Mexico, was caught by one of their own internal people paying out bribes to Mexican officials to get permits to build Walmarts across Mexico. They were caught churning out $24 million in bribes to the Mexican government. Walmart launched an investigation, and when they figured out that it was $24 million in bribes, they stopped their investigation. But I think the New York Times uncovered it. That came out in 2012. Here, this is a coastal distribution center, and this is in China. About 40 workers went on strike here. Walmart ended up firing, I think, 4 of them. You all may be familiar with the Students and Scholars Against Corporate Misbehavior. This is the group that targeted Apple's horrible Foxconn, is that what they were? This is the group that was involved in that. So this started happening, which was not good press for Walmart. Then in Chicago, there was a distribution center or warehouse center where the workers were complaining that Walmart wasn't keeping good hours for them. They were temp workers. So they filed a federal suit against Walmart for wage theft. This was significant because Walmart didn't sign the paychecks. The workers didn't actually wear Walmart uniforms. They were just temp workers. But Walmart owned all of the warehouses and factories, or leased the buildings, but owned most of them, I believe. Owned every bit of the equipment inside, right down to the shrink wrap and all of that. And the courts allowed this case to go through, so that Walmart was actually named in a wage theft suit. And then, so that was 2012, early 2012, I believe. Here in September of 2012, there were some warehouse workers in Riverside, California. How far is Riverside from LA?
About 2 hours.
So how many miles did that work out?
That's not how California.
I know, that's why I'm asking. In Texas, 2 hours means 120 miles.
Yeah, 120, maybe a little more than that.
It's inland.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
How
definitely.
many kilometers? Yeah.
At least 120.
So these people went on strike. There were about 3 dozen of them went on strike, and they were protesting unsafe working conditions. And they just walked out. They just left. They walked out one day, and they walked to downtown LA. They did a march all the way to LA, protesting. There was no union involved in this. This was completely spontaneous. But what it did was it created I guess what I would call a solidarity, sympathy set of strikes amongst Walmart workers. First one started here, October 4th, on October 4th, 2012. This is significant. This is the very first strike ever against Walmart, ever in the United States. Never happened before in the US. So this was a big deal. You'll notice the shirts here, for respect. There's a union agitating for this in the background. These strikes started in Richmond and just Southern California in general, but they went all over the place by the time we get to Black Friday. There was a coordinated effort to get strikes going on. Chicago, Dallas, Miami, Milwaukee, Washington, D.C., Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi, Minnesota. Sometimes these were just a few workers. Sometimes this might be, you know, 10s, 20s, 30 workers or so. Community activists. Their demands included everything from higher wages to better scheduling, like so that we can get full-time work and we don't have to work Christmas Eve type stuff. Better health care, workplace safety, and respect issues. This was not anything we've seen before. I don't know how much you are familiar with Wal-Mart, but they're based out of Arkansas, and they have a union assassination team that's ready to fly out of Arkansas at the moment there's any talk of a union anywhere. So there has been a straight-up unionizing effort at Wal-Mart back in 2009. It failed in large part because the firm is so good at intimidating workers. So when I saw all of this going on, being a lefty agitator myself, I was curious. So I did a little investigating. And this was an effort that was it's weird. This is not a typical union situation. This is something new. I have not seen this before. There is a union that is behind this action. It's the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. You guys have this here, UFCW, Canada, I believe. They are the largest private sector union in Canada. They're huge in the States too. They are kind of like the overarching organization here. There's 3 different subgroups here. The UFCW runs this thing called Making Change at Walmart. They've done a couple of PR type campaigns where they're trying to expose the specific abuses of Walmart as a firm to draw attention to the plight of workers. But this one's different. What Making Change does is it coordinates workers with local communities and with national campaigns. It is not an explicit unionizing system. It's not organized labor. It's not an organizing effort, let's just put it that way. They're more interested in making connections between the workers and community members. Our Walmart, which, holy crap, I can't remember what it stands for right now. Organization for something in respect. Oh God, thank you. Organization United for Respect at Walmart. Or I said I was vibing out. I had to make that economics test this morning. They are actually, this is the workers. This is a workers association. You pay $5 and you belong to this organization. It's for current employees and past employees. This is the decision-making body, not the union. Our Walmart sits on top of Making Change, if we were to have done this hierarchy correctly. So they have a board, and it's full of workers. They make the decisions, and Making Change at Walmart, the sort of union end, responds to whatever the board decides. The UFCW is there to provide guidance, but they don't actually make the top level decisions. It's actually the workers who are making it in this particular instance. So I just haven't seen a labor structure quite like this before. I don't know that it was possible before. It scales nicely because of things like Facebook and YouTube. Walmart 1% is basically like a PR blitz by the UFCW to, I don't know, show how grotesque the wealth of the Walton family is. It's a PR arm, but they all kind of work in loose coordination with each other. What they were really focusing on doing, of course, was on Black Friday. Our Thanksgiving is in November in the States. I appreciate the October Thanksgiving because I have time to recover before Christmas. So I like yours better. But that's a big shopping day, right? So they were trying to coordinate a series of strikes across the United States for that particular day. Typically, the social networking sites have functioned more as an adjunct to traditional labor organizing. It's something they bring in on the side. The unions have looked at it as a way to get extra exposure, maybe, or to coordinate with other unions, but it's definitely something ancillary to the main effort. So the old traditional pathway of organizing labor was people reach out to the union engages with them, then they activate them, radicalize them, and then send them back into a store to organize. The online pathway is a little bit different. What they're doing is that people reach out through our Wal-Mart, and then what the union has done by helping them set up this network is to connect with other workers. If you have been through the Southwest or the South and seen where Wal-Mart sets up shop, these are really small communities. I'm from Texas, which is an incredibly conservative place and very hostile to organized labor. So it's really hard if you're trying to organize something, a retail store like Walmart. There may only be 1 or 2 workers that even are interested in doing something like that. And in the past, they've just been isolated, and that's kind of the end of the story. Not so anymore. Now, through our Walmart, they can actually connect with other associates of Walmart who are interested in organizing. And so you get all of these connections built. They started out with about 100 people in this organization. I've kind of lost track. It's way, way, way up there in the big thousands now. I can't remember where. It's a moving target. But it's in, last I checked, it was 43 states. So they're really organized. They have a whole bunch of different, the UFCW has a whole bunch of different things that they're doing using Facebook and YouTube, Twitter. First off, they're trolling. So whenever there's a Walmart article or a Walmart PR blitz, coming through in the Washington Post or something like that, they go into the comment threads, and they do this as a coordinated effort. They talk to each other and they find out, okay, well, who's going to comment on this story and what are we going to say? And they try and redirect people back to their website. They also hit up, basically, they troll any Walmart forum there is. Facebook, Walmart's Facebook page, Walmart has individual store pages, there's employee associations or groups. And we love Walmart. These groups exist, right? These are people who are trying to take pride in their work. Well, these workers go in there and try and redirect them back into our Walmart. They do what they call Facebook Fridays, where they all coordinate using Facebook groups, polls, figure out what their next move is going to be. They do conference calls periodically, and they're enlisting the help of community allies. This is actually one of the first interactions. It's probably too small for you to read, but this is 2 people connecting for the first time. This guy, Michael, he's a 20-year-old overnight stalker in the middle of nowhere, United States. Totally isolated, totally alone. Here's Mary Pat. Mary Pat's like an old school labor activist type person. And they were able to connect here. So Michael eventually ends up, I think he actually ended up maybe marching on Washington, D.C. with our Walmart. He became an organizer. And this is the sort of interaction that these technologies allow that maybe would have been a lot difficult a long time ago. A lot more difficult a while back. So there are about 275,000 people that self-identify as Walmart workers or associates on Facebook. If the total population of Walmart workers is 1.4 million, we're talking about just about 20% of the labor force at Walmart is on Facebook as a Walmart worker. So what they did was they created a little app, Facebook app called Share for Respect. This number is much higher than this. This is an old number. What this app did was it allowed you to send a message to anyone in your network that had identified as a Walmart worker. So this was basically labor using the technology of targeted advertising for organizing purposes. So you could come up with a specific message that you would just click, and if anyone in your network that had identified as being associated with Walmart would receive that message, and then it would channel them back to our Walmart website. And Facebook Fridays is just what I was talking about earlier, just organizing meetings, basically. So here's what happened on Black Friday. Did this make the news up here? A little bit? No?
Did it,
A little bit? It made the news quite a bit in the States. There were actions in over 46 states. They were loaded onto what they call the Community Action Network website, which is a really cool website. It's basically protest in a box. It has all of the materials that you need in order to go get Walmart. It tells you where the nearest store is. It tells you how to protest legally in that specific jurisdiction. It gives you materials, signs. It's protest in a box, basically. So, and it connects you with other people who are thinking about marching down to Walmart and complaining. And this was downloaded, well, I say the strike toolkit was downloaded about 489 times. And then they happened to raise, although it wasn't it was part of the campaign, but it wasn't one of the big things. They ended up raising over 250,000. On the day, about 63,000 tweets, over 300,000 Facebook posts, over 300,000 signatures, fundraising. There's the map where all the different actions happen. The actions were a whole host of things. Sometimes these were sit-down strikes. Sometimes they were parking lot protests. Sometimes it would be 3, 4, 5, 6 workers, and then 1,000 protesters joining them. So the connections with the community, and by community, I mean, local churches, I mean civic leaders, I mean just people that live in the neighborhood, communities of color. I've protested at Walmart before back home in Austin, and the diversity of the people that come out, a lot of people hate Walmart. That's just all I have to say. There's not one specific demographic that wants to hate on Walmart. Walmart's response, typical, they don't really acknowledge the fact that our Walmart really exists. They have filed a couple of National Labor Relations Board complaints. David Tovar, who's their chief accounting officer, maybe, I can't remember what his position is. He went out ahead of the Black Friday protest and said it would not be a good idea for our associates to take part in this protest, which is maybe possibly an illegal statement. What else in there? Oh, Walmart CEO, that would be Mike Duke. Said that Walmart wages are competitive. That's $8.81 an hour. His salary is $18 to $20 million annually. In Florida, they sued. They sued the UFCW, and they sued the people who actually dared to protest on the parking lot. They sued because they said they needed to protect their customers from disruptive and radical, agitators. So pretty much what you would expect from them. There have been a couple of developments since then. Our Walmart campaign is ongoing. They're still working. I don't know whether to attribute these sorts of things to the protests, but right about the same time, there were a number of bad things that happened to Walmart. There was a Brooklyn store that was a major political football. They were trying to open the store in Brooklyn, and the city decided, no, actually, we're going to give it to ShopRite. That got a lot of coverage in the press. Walmart came up with a new scheduling system. For anyone who studied Walmart, the scheduling system is a major complaint. They make people work bad hours. It's not transparent. Walmart created, it was a pilot program for a long time. It actually just went live this month, I believe. So that they have a system now where workers can actually request off and can request certain hours, believe it or not. And then in May of this year, the first ever prolonged strike happened against Walmart. It lasted from, I think, May 28th to June 7th. And that culminated in these workers going to, I believe, Little Rock, Arkansas for the annual shareholders meeting to formally give a set of demands to Walmart. And then And what I think is a related thing, there's a lot of fast food strikes going on now in the States. Does this make it into the news up here? Yeah. So I'm feeling it's a lot of the same people behind this, but this sort of technology gives low-wage people in stores that are typically very difficult to organize a means of establishing connections, finding solidarity and protesting and striking, and you know, who knows what will happen. The thing is, the union used, I think, fewer than 10 people. They employed, I think, fewer than 10 people to pull this off. There are 4,000 stores, Walmart stores. In the good old days of traditional labor organizing, that would have meant at least 1 foot on the ground, set of feet on the ground per store. That would have been 4,000 people. It would have been a massive undertaking. But now, if they just flip the hierarchy and allow workers to take a more active role and use the scalability of these technologies, something different is happening. Whether or not Walmart's going to disappear or not, I don't know. But I'd say we're closer now than we have been before to seeing an organized something happening in Walmart. I don't know. We'll wait and see. All right, thank you.
I have to say, Brett, it's a great delight to see organized labor, or labor organizing using information technology tools to take on Walmart. It's used information technology incredibly effectively to radically change the supply chain, which changed their entire business structure and made them successful as a provider of stuff and an exploiter of people. It's quite remarkable. So, Leslie?
Thanks. Brett, I'm curious about Dukes versus Walmart, a case that was initiated, I think, in the early 2000s by a woman. I think her name was Betty Duke. And this was a class action. Are you familiar with the case? So it was class. She was in the year 2000. Betty Duke. She was 54 years of age. African American woman. She worked 6 years at the company, and she realized that there was huge amounts of gender discrimination at Walmart. She never made it out the ranks as much as her male counterparts. And so there was a class action suit against Walmart initiated. It wound its way to the Supreme Court in 2011. It was tossed out. And I'm curious to know if there's any strands between, let's say, this mobilization, the lack of efficacy that happened with this particular suit. And one of the reasons it was tossed out of the Supreme Court is they said, hey, it's too big a class action suit. There's too many differences. There's too many subtleties that we can't rule that this class action suit is too big. And I also noticed that, in terms of unpaid internships, now class action suits are sort of being tested, at least in the United States. So I'm just curious what there might be strands about in terms of this looked like a slam dunk case. It was tossed out. Of course, we know what the U.S. Supreme Court is like now. So that you try to build up something in a legalistic framework. God knows everybody likes to sue each other in the United States, versus a sort of really grassroots activism. Any comments about that, or?
The only thing I can really say to that is, I think that I do remember the case. Now that you remind me. Those, I believe, were the seeds that started the organization United for Respect. I think that this was more about workplace respect initially. So I think that is very much part of the seedbed of this. The cases that are going forward right now are all these RV issues right now, and I don't know where they are right now. I think what the UFCW is trying to do is make sure they actually have the right to go on strike. If that's where we are.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Brett. So Jody Dean has a really compelling critique of our participation on social media and how it fuels capitalism. But this case, in the case of the Chicago Teachers Union, which used social media to great effect and won, and bullish or sort of somewhat pessimistic?
Our inner political economist always wants to assume the worst, right? We want to assume that power is distributed in an unequal fashion. And we often make that assertion without bothering to look, and we universalize it. And I think assuming that there's an asymmetry is not necessarily good. No matter where you think the asymmetry is positioned, whether you think it's the owners, the firms, or if you're romanticizing working class subjectivity, I think that that's bad to just assume. That's a big assertion. So I really think that what you have to do is go look before you make that statement. You really have to investigate and see. And it will depend on the particular case and particular time. I mean, there are obvious inequities of power distribution that we can point to where, state, firms, whatever it is. But in cases like this, I would be willing to make a pretty strong argument that the UFCW, Wal-Mart associates are more effective at using social media than Wal-Mart is. And similarly, in my work on copyright and intellectual property law, I think that file sharers were a lot more successful at using technology than the recording industry was at adapting, even after changing statutes and filing mass copyright litigation. That industry got hollowed out. So I think you have to look. And yeah, I think that that's what I gravitate towards. I'm always trying to find victories for the little guys. And I think this is a compelling case, for sure.
Just a quick question on one of the lawyer cases that it was Wal-Mart sued the union for possibly disability study in the courts?
Yeah, they sued. As best I understand it, because this is not my area of law that I understand, they sued basically because they said the UFCW was organizing criminal trespass, that they had facilitated it and organized it. So it's like a contributory role. And I don't know how that case turned out. So I'm not sure what, the case is kind of old, so it probably has some sort of resolution at this point. But Wal-Mart can basically say, you're trespassing, you cannot come back. And so what oftentimes happens is people walk off the job, and then Wal-Mart says, don't come back, and then they come back to protest, and then they can call the cops. Or people walk off, Wal-Mart calls the cops, and then they don't leave when the police show up. It's that sort of thing usually.
So Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Great, interesting talk. You began with an unplanned brief excursion into theory, and I would invite you to connect some of those ideas to what you said subsequently, and not so much in terms of interested in the theory, but what that might suggest about what you're finding here and its sort of relevance to other kinds of settings, and what does that say about the role that social media can play in social movements. And I think it's interesting in the new case, what you were speculating was that the failure of the official institutions to bring justice that then was a spark for another approach, which looks promising, at least in terms of some kind of remediation at the very least.
I mean, I guess I look at both law and technological development as a product of unintended consequences or unplanned activity. There's a tendency, I think, among a lot of scholars to think of development, production in terms of capitalism planning way, way ahead, being so many steps ahead. And so my approach is to first off recognize that this is a dialectical process wherein humans are interacting with cultural artifacts, and then that in turn produces a institution. But the application or usage of technology is not uniform. So you have a design, or in the case of Facebook, for example, and here, you have a particular design that's encoded into the technology, and then it gets distributed, and then here I'm kind of borrowing from Stuart Hall, but you can take that particular technology and make some choices at that point. You can do the preferred use that was encoded into it, or you can negotiate, or you can oppose. And so I'm trying to see that this is a social process where there is a little bit of autonomy. So from a Marxist perspective, what I'm advocating for is a two-sided class analysis, not just a focus on the dominant class, but paying attention to antagonism and realizing that that's the actual motive force behind development. Does that speak to what you're...
But that antagonism you're talking about, that's something that goes right back to the early days of cultural studies, that whole idea of, you know, making meanings, their own meanings.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's an approach that's been heavily critiqued. And I mean, Paul, you're telling a very nice story here, you know, as a good old lefty myself, you know, I'm happy to punch the air with you. But I mean, how effective actually is it? I mean, you spoke about how many people were involved in Facebook versus the total number of employees at Wal-Mart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we need some better measures, I think, of levels of success here.
I agree.
I mean, have the protests actually changed anything, or are those old people on Facebook still back working for their, whatever it was, $18? You know, I mean, it's...
So my response to that would be that the threshold can't be revolution. The threshold has to be resistance. And then you start paying attention, and that makes it worthy of study. I mean, I don't think this is the end of history. So I just...
I'm not reading that at all. No, but it's more the, just when you invoke Stuart Hall, I mean, I think that we can't say, you know, you're wanting to look at that sort of the pushback without acknowledging that that's been an integral part of cultural studies work for decades now. And so really I was waiting for you to get somewhere where you were actually introducing another level of critique here. You know, I think it's maybe, I don't know if I'm words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering where you take this.
Yeah, it was kind of like to reintegrate the theory back into it, rather than it just being a nice story about some workers protesting using social media.
Yeah, well that's, you know, Stuart Hall pulled from Marx. So the encoding, decoding thing is the circuit of money capital. So I take it back to that, which is Marxian crisis theory. So there, I could do a fairly long presentation on that, I suppose, but it is more about looking at potential moments of rupture here. And so when I see the union organizing and fighting for better wages, that's a potential moment of rupture. I mean, even Marx argued that wage struggle was important and advocated and worked for wage struggles in the 19th century. So I could write it off and say, well, that's just reformist and it won't go anywhere. But it is a part of class struggle, and it determines the trajectory of capitalist development.
But those ruptures have happened all the time with trade union activities since there were trade unions.
Right, and I
think
agree.
the question is, and it seemed to me your point about social media, is that offering something different? Is that offering something
No,
new?
but it teaches us how social media develops. It's conditioning the trajectory of development. So that's all I'm arguing here. Not arguing that this is necessarily going to end up with the toppling of Wal-Mart, but in order to understand the trajectory of development, we have to still pay attention to those clashes. Does that speak to what you're...
Kind of. I'm not
So as much as I would really love to let this continue, I have to be fair to the next four speakers. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Please